keep them away from all the politics and all that stuff. You know, my kids didn't have a clue. Ben, who's back there, he's the lead pastor down at Hillsong LA. I remember, like, he was only a teenager. So when I did become, you know, like president of our movement, I came home and said, I was elected, da, da, da. He goes, what does that even mean? You know, we just kept them away from the politics of church life and only exposed them as much as we could. We avoid as much as we could talking, you know, the stuff, or, you know, who's saying what, and, you know, who's done what to hurt us, or we just kept that out of the house altogether. And I think that's critical with children. And so, vision. I think vision, you know, that's what energizes you. That's what keeps you going. That's what gives you the, you know, that's, if you've got vision, you find the time, you find the people, you find the money. It just, you know, it just works for you.
What would be the biggest challenge that you're facing right now? And then the second part of that question is probably, what's the thing that you have most vision for right now, like the thing that lights you, that just excites you right now in this season?
Yeah, it's a big question. I'm pretty passionate right at this moment about this book, I have to say, as you've probably noticed. The biggest challenge right now, probably just making sure we get over to that venue at the right time. Yeah, biggest challenge right now. Our church has been through a big transition in Australia, because, you know, Bobby and I are senior pastors of the church, and everyone sees us as so, but we actually have lead pastors in Australia now as well, who, like, you know, carry all the day-to-day of the church. And we took 3 years in that progression, you know. And it was like, it wasn't tension in a negative sense, but, you know, just sort of letting go, and, you know, sort of like it was kind of like a tension for 3 years. Once it fell into place, it's been incredible. And so it just means Bobby and I, in terms of a global church, you know, our eyes have sort of been lifted higher. And so that's sort of present challenge, as much as it was a challenge, you know. But present challenge, yeah, I'm not sure. We've always got outside forces that we're facing. Australia, you know, Hillsong's got a huge profile, because really mega churches they're not normal. That's right. And so people think you must be doing something wrong. You wouldn't have all those people if you're doing it, you know, so, and, you know, I think their model of the church is Franciscan monks, really. Right. You know, so we always got outside challenges coming at us. It's balanced out tremendously. But I find, like, you know, if you're called to be a church builder, you're energized for it. So even the challenges, you can rise above them. The things that I find will stress me the most are not, you know, things that relate to building a church. They're things that come at us from the outside, like, you know, media or whatever else sort of comes at you from the outside. That would be my biggest challenge.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. What's your biggest challenge right now?
The transition that we're in.
The transition that you're in, yeah. Okay?
Yeah, you mentioned that Darlene had such a huge impact on the worship at Hillsong. I'm just curious, in the story of your church, at what point did you guys realize that writing worship music for the church was going to be such an integral part of who you were? I mean, obviously it's a huge part of who Hillsong is. So at what point did you realize, hey, this is more than just picking up songs out of a book, but this is something that's going to be an integral part of who we are?
You know, today I spent about 2 hours with Steve Furtick, who interviewed me for a leadership thing he's going to do. And we kind of talked about that, and I was reminded, Bobby got saved in a church in New Zealand, which is 15 as well. And that church at the time in New Zealand, New Zealand's a tiny country. And, you know, probably growing up, my dad's church, we probably had 600 to 800 people in it. It was kind of like the rocking church in New Zealand. And this church in Auckland, it just exploded, and it had 3,000 people, which we thought then was like, you know, in New Zealand sense, that was just like crazy. And they had their own Jesus revolution, you know, like an incredible Jesus revolution. And part of what they did was worship music. So there was a thing called scripture and song. Some of you, I don't know whether anyone here is old enough to remember it. But scripture and song started as basically their worship music. The church was really conservative, and their music was kind of beautiful, but it was not radical at all. But I just love the idea of a church that was innovative, because I've always wanted to have the kind of church that, you that basically help the church at large. I'm a huge believer in the local church. I'm an advocate for the local church. I want to be a spokesperson for the local church at conferences. The theme is champion the cause of the local church everywhere. And so really, long before we ever started, that was back in the 70s, I sort of had it in my heart that if we ever had a church, that we'd be innovative with songwriting and worship and so on. So that kind of started right there, and it's sustained generations. I think it's been a great lesson for people because people have looked to an individual and thought it's all about them. So when they're gone, they sort of think, but time after time after time, people have said this is where it's a great testimony for the power of the church, because time and time and time again, when it's the right time for people to move on, things haven't gone backwards; they actually have gone forwards. So our worship right now, in terms of its impact and globally and so on, is by far the strongest it's ever been. And, you look at Darlene and Mark, because they pastor their own church now, about 100 kilometres, 60 miles from our church, and they're happy and they're doing great and so on. But I've seen how God, he looks after his church, and I've seen it over 32 years. So Darlene walks out, and if you know who Taya Smith is, Oceans, she walked in. And it's just been the same right through this journey. And so, I've really learned to trust God when it comes to people and church.
Amen.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yeah, Bobby.
I think it's important for some people observing our worship or music to understand that in all truthfulness, the song comes out of the house. The song in our house comes out of the life of a healthy church, and it always has and it always did. It's not the other way around. And of course, in stewarding that, because obviously God's breathed on it and anointed it, and I guess longevity bears witness to that, but it's not the other way around. And of course, in stewarding it, you try to steward it, and a lot more dynamics come into play. But I get quite protective when suddenly I'm feeling like the industry that's helping us steward it is asking us to, the tail to wag the dog. It's not that way around, and so it's interesting dynamics, but it's I think it's important. I remind our team of that all the time. It's like, hey, the flow, it's flowing out of the life of the church and out of the flow of the fabric of teaching and what God's saying, not the other way around. And we start to get into trouble if we actually make it the other way around.
Yeah, it's good. Absolutely. We'll get to it in just one sec. Just so one thing I'm a great, that scripture that us pastors love, Psalm 92:13, those who are planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of our God. So I'm a 100% believer in that. But I also turn it around and look at my responsibility in that. So it's the will of God for the people in our church to flourish. Mm-hmm. So I have to ask myself the question, can they flourish under my ministry? And if they can't flourish, why would they stay planted? Because those who are planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish. That's God's will.
So good.
And so a great question for anyone to ask yourself is, can people genuinely flourish under my ministry? And the old model, probably here in the US in particular, where basically you're the man and everyone else is just staff and we hire people, that will never cause people to flourish. But if you can have a big enough vision and keep having a vision that's big enough to lift the ceilings for people, it's amazing how people, and you don't get insecure about people's lives starting to rise. So Christine Kane, she still would see herself and does see herself, and basically her giving and everything else, she still sees herself as part of Hillsong Church. But you got to have a big enough vision to be able to contain that. So a great question for any young pastor is, are you secure enough for the people around you in your world to flourish? And some of them be better at certain things they do than you are. Wow. And I just said actually to these guys in the front row here, because Greg, he's in a different season now, he runs the ARC movement. And, I said to him, oh, yeah, but, every house has only got one father. And one thing I've learned in our church that's really helped me, and especially when it comes to transition, because, unlike you, I'm still very much the senior pastor, unlike your dad in your situation, I'm still the senior pastor of our church. But I'm not there, I'm probably there 6 months of the year. And this year maybe even less. But what I do know, what makes me feel secure is every family only has one father. So sometimes when our kids were growing up, they'd have people look after them, they'd have fun, and we don't have Disneyland in Australia, but they'd be the guys who would take them to Disneyland and kind of looked after them when, I was away. And I remember one guy was always finding 20 cents behind his ear, and giving them the 20 cents, and they'd go, do it again. But you know what? I'm still their father. They've only got one father.
Right.
So I don't feel insecure about the fact they love him because I'm their father. In church life, if you realise, that no matter how gifted the people around you are, if God's anointed you to be the leader, you don't have to prove it, you don't have to strive for it, you don't have to do anything. You just got to be. And it's amazing how they'll keep you in good stead. Everyone has disappointments with leadership. I'm talking about the people around you. Everyone does. But you can minimize those completely. And one of the things that'll cause you to, people to bust out is just insecurity in a leader, getting threatened by other people's capacity and things like that.